grieving. Some families will be lost to one another forever. To those of you who face the difficulties of reconnecting with family and establishing ongoing relationships, we say sorry. We offer this apology in the hope that it will assist your healing and in order to shine a light on a dark period of our nation's history. To those who have fought for the truth to be heard, we hear you now.
You're listening to Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption. I'm one of your hosts, Jo Sparrow. This podcast is a production of Jigsaw Queensland Post-Adoption Support Service. However, the views expressed are those of the people participating, not necessarily Jigsaw Queensland. The podcast discusses adult themes and listener discretion is advised. Hi everyone, welcome to Adopt Perspective. I'm your host Jo Sparrow and I'm also the president of Jigsaw Queensland. Today's guest was born in Manilla in the Philippines and was adopted in 1976 by Australian parents who brought her home to the Mornington Peninsula in Victoria. Lindy Saunders was told shifting stories about her origins, as many adopted people, particularly intercountry adoptees, often are. But she felt that it was disrespectful to dig too hard for the truth. And it wasn't until her adoptive father passed away 3 years ago that her curiosity outgrew those feelings and she began to search for her biological family. That search uncovered truths, half-truths, and it took her across the world to America. Welcome to Adopt Perspective, Lindy. I'm so happy to have you join us today.
Hi, Jo. Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
It's exciting to have you. Lindy, I thought that we would just start out, if you wouldn't mind sharing your adoption story with us.
Okay. So, yeah, you said I was adopted in 76, so I was born in 1975 towards the end in the Philippines. And it took me a few months to physically come out. I think there were a few issues with getting me out of the Philippines. And to this date, I don't have original paperwork at all, so there's a lot around that I don't know. But yeah, having found biological people recently, a bit of it's been filled in. So yeah, pretty much my life as I know it began when I arrived in Australia as a baby in early 76. Grew up very happily on the Mornington Peninsula. I always knew I was adopted, and it was sort of presented as a really happy bedtime fairy tale story about how much my parents had wanted a child and couldn't have their own, and I was the daughter, the baby that they prayed for, and so I was very, very loved, very cherished, and made to feel like I was special. Actually, I felt like I was extra special. I remember in primary school there was another child who came to the school who was adopted, and I'd heard about that. So I guess people must have known adoption was just one of my labels. And I went, oh, there's another adopted girl. And I took a look at her and went, well, she doesn't look special. Poor girl. But I just felt like it was an extra special thing. And I guess I was proud of it, but didn't know what it all meant until more years later when I came out of the fog. So I was their first child to my parents, and they had another child, their own biological child, a few years later. So I grew up with a younger brother. And when I was about 5 years old, I got told that my biological mother had died. And so I kind of, growing up since then, I always knew I was adopted. I knew where I came from, and I was told my mother had died. But I didn't really know much more about that, and I really didn't unpack it at all as a child. It was sort of just a fact. Teenage years, I was very much a high achiever at school, straight A student. Seemed to have everything, I guess. I really, lovely world I lived in, but I was starting to suffer from depression, and really was suffering from depression in my later teens and couldn't understand it. I've been going to counsellors since I was 19, all on my own, just kept going to different counsellors and was always thinking, what's wrong with me? I sort of took depression as something I had no control of, and something that something I was just trying to overcome, but it was never ever connected to being adopted until more recently. So yeah, I guess I really did struggle in those late teens, early 20s. But yeah, I'm happy to be here today, and I've learned a lot in my journey.
Yeah. You knew, like, apart from people who went to school, you said you met someone who went to school, you knew only one other adoptee from the Philippines in your family, and that was your cousin who lived interstate. I had quite a few other adopted people in my family. However, I never felt that I was allowed to discuss that experience with them. It just kind of felt a little, verboten, a little bit forbidden. I don't know if anyone ever said that. It was just the vibe that I got. And it wasn't so much from my parents, but more from the parents of the other people to a degree. I was just wondering, how was that for you?
Yeah, so I had, how I came to be with my adoptive family was complicated, I guess. So it was arranged by my adoptive mother's cousin who was living in the Philippines. And she had adopted a little baby then, who, when they did come back to Australia, they lived in Sydney and we lived in Melbourne. So my adoptive cousin, who was my mum's cousin's daughter, we were exactly the same age, came from the same country. So we seemed close, but physically we weren't close. We didn't really even see each other often. It was just, same stage of development. And when we did catch up, we were, we'd hug each other like sisters and feel like we had this super close bond. But I also knew one other adoptee growing up who did go to my same school, and our mums were friendly, and so we knew it, and they were Asian as well, but we didn't talk about it. It wasn't, how do you feel, until I was about 18, 19, and I spoke to my cousin for the first time. I guess we were young adults and we were living away from home, and I got together with her and I was like, well, how do you feel about being adopted? Because it was obviously pertinent in my mind. I'd always been curious, but her and the other girl I knew, they were like, oh no, I don't want to look, I don't want to trace it, it doesn't really bother me. So I kind of just shut up again, because thinking, oh, well, I can't talk about it with them. I guess everything was kept inside, all these questions, and I didn't have anyone to talk to about them. I felt not rejected by them, but I felt like, okay, I'm different to them. Maybe there's something wrong with me for thinking about it.
I think sometimes too, like the lack of questions we seem to have, or conversation around it could be because we've kind of been raised to believe that there's nothing bad has happened. Like, there's nothing to talk about. There's only good things. You're just like, the fairy tale child for your parents, and there's no loss. And so it's hard to have a conversation with another adopted person when you've got this belief around, well, there's nothing bad's happened.
No, well, we were made to feel grateful, appreciative, lucky. So anything, just in my own mind, any questions that just didn't fit that. Yeah. I didn't even have the words. I didn't even know what to ask. There was just a feeling of unsettlement, and I didn't know who to talk to or how to talk about it at that stage.
Domestic adoptees often report feelings of not fitting in with their adoptive families, and sometimes also the communities that they're raised in. You sort of touched on this a little bit already, but inter-country adoptees have those additional cross-cultural, if I can get my words out, complexities. What was it like growing up as an adoptee from the Philippines in Australia as far as fitting in?
I was lucky. Once again, I hate that word. I'm half Filipino and half American. So I have very, very pale. I don't look Filipino. I passed well for a Caucasian. I passed well for looking like a genetic child of my parents. So yeah, like my cousin who was full Filipino or another ones, I guess I didn't have any of those issues. I think I was aware, just sensitive to any conversations or things around me that were perhaps a bit racist. We were brought up in a community where there weren't many Asians, so yeah, you could pick out maybe 2 people at the whole school, and one of them was my adopted friend. And I guess I felt Asian, it felt like part of my identity, yet it was something that felt really hidden. I didn't identify with it at all. Now that I look on it, my cousin from the Philippines, she had a completely different perspective to me because she had lived in the Philippines. Her whole family had lived in the Philippines for a period of time. When they came to Australia, she had a Filipino housewife came with them. So she ate Filipino food, all of those things. And I didn't have any of that. So yeah,
I was going to ask if you had any of that opportunity to engage with your cultural language.
No, not at all. So I've never been back. My parents didn't go there to get me. I got sent to Australia. So I've had just no connections whatsoever. And it's now especially that I'm just so curious. It's the next place on my list I want to get to. I'm starting to try to learn a few Filipino words, but yeah, there's that whole language barrier. So I feel like if I go there, I'd be a huge outsider. But I want to explore that part of me that's been denied up until now.
Yeah. When I was growing up, I was very cognizant of the fact that if one set of parents had given me away, then my adoptive parents could do that also. And as a consequence, I was very nervous about being away from my parents. I was like 13 before I spent a night away from them, unless my adoptive brother was with me, because I knew that he was theirs and they'd come back for him. I was wondering if you had any experience like that.
No, I guess my brother was biological and I wasn't. So I think I was aware or always sensitive if there were differences, but I felt very much loved. I felt, we were treated much the same, just differences probably being a boy and a girl. So that I think I was just attuned to going, oh, are they treating me differently? I think just more paranoia, suspicion, which maybe was in my head, maybe it wasn't. I actually became very, very independent. So which I guess that can be a protective mechanism as well. It was like, that's probably thinking, not trusting, not realizing it, but going, I'm going to be independent. I'm going to do things my way and I'm going to look after me. So, yeah.
For me, adoption has always simmered away in my emotional background, kind of twisting and turning me sometimes, and I didn't really know why or how or, why I thought the way I did. However, it's also reared its head in really big ways at times in my life, particularly when I became a mother. I was wondering how you were impacted when you became a mother.
Oh, that was huge, obviously. So, as I said, I was 32 when I became a mother, and being adopted it was just part of who I was, and it had always been there as a curiosity factor. And by that time at 32, I'd been with my partner, my husband, who was just in the background here. If you saw me pulling funny faces, I was like, shush, be quiet. So he'd been with me. We've been together for 10 years, so he knew me very well. Sorry, I've got distracted. But and he'd been saying to me, I guess all that time, since he knew I was adopted, he was like, why don't you trace up? Why don't you want to find something out? And I guess it was fear. I had all these reasons why not. And I guess a big reason was respect for my adoptive parents. But yes, becoming a mother, getting pregnant, it was brought everything to the foreground of thinking, okay, well, this is what it's like to carry a child. It made me think about my biological mother constantly. She'd been there as a question mark or as an underlying feeling, but suddenly there wasn't any ignoring it when I myself was pregnant, 9 months of carrying a baby, giving birth, and you think, wow, you realize the bond that you have and how significant that time is for me as a mother. So that's what she experienced, although obviously a different time and probably a lot of stress due to her circumstances. But yeah, I guess when I looked at my baby and held her, it was like, how could she have given me away? Or not? I felt heartbroken that my biological mum, had to say goodbye, and I felt like she absolutely loved me. That she would love me, and I knew that she wouldn't have forgotten about me. As a kid, you're like, oh, maybe she didn't want me, she forgot about me. It just made me realize, no, this is nothing you're going to forget in a hurry. And she would carry part of me with her whole life. So yeah, it made me want to find out more, want to explore once again. But I think due to then being super busy as a mum, it suddenly got swept aside in just life. So I guess I was very good at putting off my search. There was obviously some hesitation and fear, and I would let other things be a number one focus in my life, like looking after my new baby. And I've got 2 children now. So since then, every step is a reminder. It's a reminder of just seeing children grow up. So reminder of my own childhood. It's like replaying in a way. And now they're teenagers. So it's looking at when I was a teenager, which, as I said, I did struggle. I had depression. I didn't have the best relationship with my adoptee mother. We didn't get along, or, I was pulling one way, she was pulling the other. So it just makes me constantly reflect it all. And and I guess history repeats itself too. Like I realize how much of me goes down to them. We're not on this journey alone at all.
Yeah. So it was the death of your adoptive father that sort of spurred you into thinking about looking for your biological family. Why do you think that his passing sort of opened that door for you?
It was a difficult time. He died of cancer, so he was sick for a long, long time, and that became the huge focus. It opened up grief. Obviously there was the natural grief of losing him, which we were experiencing for quite a while. Then the grief of him passing, and when I guess I was clear, I was able to let go of all the bad stuff that we'd been going through there. And then I looked at the grief and it was so familiar to me. I felt like this is what I have been carrying and burying my whole life. I was able to just recognize that emotion and realize I have grief for my biological mother, just for her not being here forever. And also I was told that she had died when I was about 5, and I realized I'd been told that, and it was just a fact. I was suddenly really grieving, who is she? Who was she? So it just, there's my dog, sorry. It just opened up a huge amount of questions. And I realized too that I had been putting off, thinking I wouldn't search until my adoptive parents had died. And now that my father had, it was sort of like, well, what am I waiting for? Anyone I'm trying to find would be getting older as well, and I might be leaving it too late. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background.
It's okay.
Not too bad. And yeah, it sent me off to start, as they say, coming out of the fog, just looking at adoption in a new light, joining, listening to podcasts like yourself. I actually got onto the American one first, the Adoptees On, and was thoroughly enjoying listening to that. So then I was like, well, is there something in Australia? So that's when I happily found you guys, and I started connecting with Jigsaw and just social media, a whole lot of adoptee people that I'd never been part of that world. As I said, I knew a cousin and one other. I kind of said, what do you think? They didn't say much. So I just shut down exploring and thinking about it. Started to read books like The Primal Wound, and just a huge eye-opener. Once you open all of that, which I guess you could almost say it's Pandora's box, but once you open it, you know, you're not going to put it back in.
Yeah. Did you feel supported by your adoptive family to search and explore?
I was supported, I guess, by my husband and my children. I spoke about it with them. I didn't talk about all my thoughts and feelings at that stage because I never really had. I think I did catch up with my brother, who's a few years younger, and I asked him, I said, what do you know about me being adopted? You know, and he goes, well, I know you're adopted, but, you know, that was it. There wasn't really, we didn't know, hadn't talked about it. So there wasn't even anything to continue discussing. It had all just been, that's what it is. We don't talk about it. But so I was trying to educate him or tell him, well, this is what's on my mind. This is how I'm feeling. And he said, well, you know, you should try Ancestry.com. You should get your DNA tested, which I felt really happy that he'd said that because I'd actually just recently done it. So yeah, the technology is now around, and I went, well, let's try that. And I did it really expecting nothing would happen. I was probably really, I think it was I gave it to myself as my birthday present and sent it off. It was during COVID time, so I kept getting emails back once I sent it off saying, oh, you know, we've got it, it's progressing in the queue, but it's really, really slow. So I think it took about 4 months, where it's normally meant to take about 6 weeks.
Yeah, really slowed down during COVID.
Yeah, so I kind of got used to there being emails popping in saying, you know, you're sorry about the delay, you know, you're still in the queue, until one day in February of 2021, I'm forgetting what years it was. Yeah, 2 years ago. I got an email out of the blue saying your results are in, and I just utterly freaked out.
Well, you have to tell us, because this is how essentially you went about your search. Being intercountry, it gets a little bit more complex too. So your results are in. Tell us about what you discovered.
So yeah, and I wasn't prepared. I mean, I'd sent them in, but I was used to going, yeah, and it's all delayed, nothing's happening, and I was utterly minimizing any expectations. So yeah, just to know it was there and I had to click on a button. And yeah, I didn't even really know what I was looking at, but suddenly I've got lots of links and I did lots of connections. The first thing that hit me was that I was, I think, 33% German.
Wow.
I didn't even tell you that. And I was like, what the heck? And I had learnt, when I was in high school, I had learnt German from primary school, and then I carried it all the way through high school. So when I was in year 12, German class, I was the only person in the class who wasn't German origin, so I didn't know I was, or had been there as an exchange student. So suddenly I was like, oh, that's why I stuck with it. I don't know, it's when you find out all these things, so much, I guess, a coincidence, but it's bizarre.
Makes sense. I don't think it's a coincidence.
You know, it's so like, oh, okay, yeah, things that I didn't know, but yeah, have come to light. So I had some first and second cousins connections, which is really close, which you're like, wow. So I think I took several hours, you know, I kind of freaked out for the rest of the day. I had normal work and life going on, and I had to compose my message, which took me a while. So I wrote what I thought was going to be fine to contact and ask, but not too needy and not too desperate and not to scare them off and not to, you know, scare myself too much. So sent it out. One person got back to me pretty quick that evening, and she sort of went, oh yeah, you're probably my cousin because I've got a huge family. So yeah, I'll see what I can find out. So she didn't know what I was really talking about, but she was happy to communicate. And so she's my savior. It's amazing. I have met her now, and just the story's overwhelming. So she got back to me the next day. So it was all within 30 hours of the results coming in. And there was time difference because she was in America. And she got back to me. She said, I've had a few things because I had information as a child where I thought my mum's name was Helen. I knew what age she was, and I knew what year I thought she died in a car accident. So yeah, she came back and said, could her name have been Elena? And I'm like, that sounds close. But yeah, I sort of went, she's on the right track. There's definitely something here. So she was contacting me and asking to put me in a Facebook group with other people, other relatives. So I said, okay. I was so scared. And I'm have my privacy settings, or I kind of don't just befriend anybody. And suddenly I was befriending new people. One of them who sent a friend request was his name was Mr. Sweets, and this middle-aged guy just grinning, and I'm like, oh, he looks dodgy. It turns out he's my first cousin, and he's lovely, and he's a pastry chef, so that's the
Mr.
name.
Sweet. Yeah.
So yeah, they were suddenly just sending me photos. My whole life, I guess, believing that my mother was dead and that I couldn't meet her. I thought I just would love a photo. I'd love a photo of her and my father. I actually got told somewhere along the line, from my cousin, I got told that my mother had died in a car accident, and that she had married my father after giving me away, and had two more children. And
this is what you had been told before.
Yeah, I
you
know.
met them,
and it
right?
was her
Yes.
and the two children that had died in the car accident. So this is
Mhm.
years ago. This was when I was 20.
Mhm.
And it devastated me at the time. And sorry, I'm jumping all over the place.
No, it's okay. That's what it's like. This is how it all kind of percolates in our head. Carry on.
And so at that time, I sort of went, oh, I do want to. I was devastated, and I thought I need to try to find the father that I hadn't thought about, thinking, he might have lost everyone in this family apart from me. So yeah, coming into this, I didn't know much about the death. I didn't know, searching, if the death of my mother was even true. Through my 20s and 30s, I kind of was suspicious that the info I was being given and never being given the proper paperwork or proof, and sometimes the stories from my adoptive mother seemed to be changing or not adding up. So I was thinking, is she even really dead, or was that just convenient to tell me to stop me from looking? Yeah, I didn't know. But yeah, I had 4 people who were relatives looking at me, and they started giving me names and facts. They told me that my mum had died in 1980. So I was relieved that I'd been told the truth, but also extremely upset as well. They introduced me to my cousin. They said my mum had 4 sisters, and then there was 2 other people on the page, talking to me, and they introduced them as Dawn and Zara. And Zara started to speak, and she says, oh, well, Dawn's my sister, and our mother was Elena. And I had been writing notes of Granny's name. They were just giving me names, and I just went, isn't that my mother's name? And they went, yes, nodding. And I just went, are you my sisters? And they were nodding, and so went face to face. And we were all crying pretty quickly. So as I said, the info that I'd had that was all confused before, I had no idea that I was looking for siblings, or if there had ever been siblings, I guess I thought that they had died. Mm-hmm. So I was blown away, and so emotional. They're gorgeous. They're lovely. Since then, that's about 2 years ago now, we've been having a good online relationship. So they're in America. So yeah, my life's really confusing. I was born in the Philippines. This was my Filipino side of the family, but all of the Filipino side of the family now live in America. And my American father, at this stage, I didn't know anything, but I kept searching. So about 6 months later, from the initial ancestry DNA discovery, we did find my father, which is an utter miracle. I don't know how we did that, because on that side of the family, the closest contacts were 6th and 7th cousins, which is, so far down. So, but once I'd found my mother's side and made those connections, I had questions answered for the first time ever, but it just led to more and more questions. So my whole life had been a big question mark with nothing, no details at all. And then suddenly when she's filling it in, then there's just more and more questions. So I was getting really frustrated and curious. Well, who's my father? What happened there? And because there were contacts of some sort, I just kept looking at them and trying to figure it out and going down a rabbit hole. I reached out to some of the 6th and 7th cousins who had large family trees, and one of them got back to me and said, "Oh, I will. I don't know, but I'll keep looking." And he traced it back, saying, "I think we're connected from this guy, this German guy, who was in the late 1700s." So he was quite a historian of his own family tree and pinpointed where he felt the link was. So it was months later, and I'd forgotten about him and forgotten about it. He emailed me back once again. I turned on my computer. Here's an email going, "Oh, I hope you don't mind. I've kept searching, and I think I found your father." And he had taken it upon himself to find, because he figured I was the great grandchild of this common ancestor, and he'd been tracking down and found about 100 descendants, and he was looking for a connection with the Philippines, and only had just found a newspaper article that had popped up, and it was about a woman who'd just turned 100, and turned out she's my grandmother. And so it mentioned her and her family. It had a picture of her and her daughter, which is my aunt, and it mentioned her son who was living in the Philippines. And we're like, that's it. And he showed me the photo, and I even looked like my auntie there. So it was just amazing. I still cannot believe what I discovered. And for that whole year of, what was it, 2021, I was like an emotional wreck every single weekend, because I had to live my normal life and look after kids and run my business, and I was really excited telling everyone about it, but then I'd have a crash on the weekend. It was overwhelming, because there was births and deaths and just too much to process, really.
That's a lot. That's a lot to take in. What did you discover, so with your mother and the situation with who she married and her passing, what did you end up sort of discovering was true and not true about that?
So so my sisters, I guess they filled me in on all they knew, but she had died when they were really, really little. So I was not quite 5 when she died. My next sister, Zara, was 3 and was in the car accident as well. It was a jeepney in the Philippines, and she'd gone flying through the air. It was her very first memory of that car accident. And my sister Dawn was 1. So they've grown up without their mother. So in a way we could bond well, because we all had that same loss. But so they filled me in on what they knew. And then obviously when I met my father, he filled me in on his side. So my mum had got pregnant. My father wasn't on the scene for very long. It seems once she told him, he pretty much rejected her and me, the idea of me. He had been told that she was pregnant, and he didn't want to be a father. He'd probably suggested that she have an abortion, which she didn't want to do. And I think they had a fight, and she told him, agreed that he wouldn't be a good father and left. And then he didn't have any more contact with her. So when I actually did find him, I've found him and I've spoken to him. I haven't met him yet, but when I spoke to him, he didn't have a clue about me or my life or my existence really until I was 45 years old, and his sister went, "Oh, I've found a daughter who's trying to reach you." So he hadn't been told that I was born or anything, and he obviously wasn't around to be caring at that point. So my mother had kept it a secret from her whole family. So she wasn't married to him, and she had, I think she'd had a drama. She was quite a strong-willed, educated, bit of an activist, political activist at the time, and she had been arrested probably a year or so earlier, and it had been a big drama, and she sort of brought disgrace to her family. So I think because of that, and there was problems with her parents were split up and that, so she felt like she didn't have the support, or that she didn't want to cause dramas once again. So I think she was just wanting to handle it herself. Ended up in a convent, and no doubt being, strongly coerced as to what the best scenario was for that time and place. So and to that day, till recently, all of her sisters had no idea of my existence. Which was interesting when I went to America. So I did go to America. Oh my God.
I was going to say, so you reached out to me last year. And you said that in that initial email, it was that you were going to be meeting your family in October or November of last year. So take us through that.
So pretty much, I was getting to know my sisters and talking to also the cousins, and photos were sent to me, and it was amazing. Very surreal, but after a while I was like, I have to meet these people. Like, just they didn't feel real. I mean, I felt like I know them as much as I can, and I'm a bit weird. I'm being a teacher and that, and I was sending my sisters like quizzes, like, what are your top 10 this and that, just trying to fast track getting to know them, because as well as the joy of finding them, meeting them, there's that loss, and there's the why haven't I known I have had sisters for 45 years? Why? How do I get to know them instantly? So eventually it was like, that's what I have to go there. I wanted to take my whole family. I've got husband and 2 children who love me and support me, and I wanted us all to go to America and travel. So I had family in different areas, travel around, and I guess I was wanting them as my buffer zone to, they would be my emotional support. And also if it got too heavy, I'd be distracted by the kids. We could go to Disneyland, we could have distractions to make it all fabulous and not such an emotionally intense experience as well. But it was going to cost, well, you can imagine, it's going to cost a lot of money. And partway through the year I was like, I don't think we can afford to do this. So it was a jigsaw counselor who I was getting really upset and moody, going, I just want to get there. And she said, well, it's about you. Why don't you just go on your own? Can you afford for you to go? And I'm like, yes. But I was like, I wasn't mentally prepared to go on my own. So that's what ended up happening. And my sisters were rapt. They were really happy. They're like, yep, you can stay with me. We'll take you around. So my sister Dawn, she got on to planning the whole thing. So she was like the project manager. They said, you won't be alone. All you have to do is, get here. As soon as you hop off the plane, we'll be there and we'll look after you. So I'm like, okay. But oh my God, I was utterly freaked out because I guess I've never been away from my family. My kids are, 12 and 14 at the time. And I'd been away for 2 nights at most. And so my trip ended up being about 5 weeks. So just to be away from them. for that amount of time. And also, as I said, they were my support. And I was going to the other side of the world. I'd never been to America. To be honest, I was a bit scared because of what we see on the news. And, I was just, I'm going to get mugged as soon as I hop off the plane. And, goodness knows what's going to happen. So I was utterly terrified. But I knew I had to do it. And then only about a month before, or a few weeks beforehand, when my sisters were nutting out the schedule, and they said, what do you want to do? Who do you want to meet? And I said, I really want to meet all my aunts. I want to meet my mum's sisters so that they can fill me in on what my mum was like, on her background, on her childhood. And they kind of went quiet because we would often talk in a group. And I went, what? And it turned out they hadn't told the aunts, they hadn't told the extended family yet about my existence. So I was like, okay. And it turned out that they'd had a bit of a disagreement. So one sister wanted to tell everyone, one sister didn't. So it was a bit complicated. I had to write another letter saying, this is how I feel. And, you don't want to be a secret. When you're 40, we're people. We shouldn't be something that's hidden away. So it can feel a bit, it feels a whole lot of feelings. You don't want to offend anyone, but you're like, well, I feel a bit offended that you think you can try to pretend I don't exist. So to this day, my sisters are my half sisters. Their father it was true that my mum got married very soon afterwards, but it wasn't to my father. It was their father, who was a close friend, and obviously they fell in love. And he helped support my mum when she was pregnant with me. So he's the one person in the world actually who knew of my existence. And at this point, so I have had my trip, he didn't want to meet me. I'm hopeful that might change. I hope maybe next time. I'm definitely going back to America. But yeah, he's the one person who knows what my mum was going through and how she was feeling. And it turns out he was he actually saw me. But yeah, I'm jumping ahead. So yeah, I went there and I was very terrified. And my sisters assured me I flew to LA. So one sister lives in LA, the other one lives in Seattle. So my plan was to go to LA, I'd stay there for a while, be traveled around and meet a lot of relatives who live down there, or the sisters. So they did tell them that I was coming, and they were suddenly excited. So they were bombarding me with emails, and one of them, they were lovely. 2 aunts sent me emails saying, they couldn't wait to meet me, and they wanted my mum, my adoptive mum's contact details. They wanted to contact her and say thank you for, to her for, welcome the whole family into the family. And that just broke me, because at that time, and now I wasn't talking to my adoptive mother. So yeah, I'm currently estranged for about a year now, and it was a bit over an adoption issue, and yeah, it's heartbreaking once again. So was preparing to go to America, and I wasn't able to share any of this with my mother or my brother that I grew up with, and I still haven't. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah. So I've lost track.
You went over and you met the extended family, and
yeah, it was a whirlwind.
Yeah.
I mean, I was really scared that I was going to cry the whole time. I was scared I was just going to be an emotional wreck, and I didn't. I was like, my cheeks were hurting because I was smiling so much. It was a drama right from the start, because when I got to the airport and I was looking for them, and the plane was, running late, and we couldn't get off the plane. It was just sitting there, and then I rushed out, couldn't see them, so I rushed to luggage, couldn't see them, and then got connected, and they were stuck in traffic, and so they actually weren't there.
Oh no.
So I ended up sitting, and everyone got their luggage and cleared off, and I was just sitting there going, right, I'm here. But,
No.
and when they finally came, they had a sign, so like they had
Yeah.
It was funny. It was like, because it wasn't what I'd expected. I'd been imagining it forever, and it was the opposite. And then it was a whirlwind of people I didn't know. I mean, I was jet lagged. I didn't know who was who. As soon as I got to my sister's house, like there was just people coming out of everywhere, at the door, out of room, saying hello, welcome. And it turned out some of them were neighbors, like neighbors in the street had heard about me. So everyone was really excited.
I'm feeling overwhelmed on your behalf, because I mean, even without being overseas, being without your family, having all of those people, I mean, it's overwhelming meeting your biological relatives for the first time without any of that.
No,
but you had a lot going on.
and that's, I mean, before I even got there, I was like, well, what if we don't get along? And because of foster reasons, I was staying in their homes, and I'm like, my worst case scenario is like, I can just go and find a hotel and check in, I'll be okay, I'll just survive. But none of those fears were realized at all. It was just absolutely wonderful, which I know I'm so lucky. I still hate that word, lucky. But it's heartbreaking as well. Like now that I've come, because it was so good, now I'm back home over the other side of the world, and you're like, when do I see them again? How, I want them to come straight away. But I found out, my sister's father he was just, I guess feeling threatened by it all, and it had been such an emotional time in his life. And after my mother had died, he got me remarried, and so I think, and he had 2 more children. So he's not biologically connected to me at all, and I feel like he sort of thinks, I'll just keep out of it. He doesn't want to upset his second wife or his other kids. So I was being kept a secret from them, which was confusing, because it's a big family. So actually my sister's other siblings knew some of the aunts, so people were keeping secrets from other people. But I think slowly, that's all becoming a bit more unraveled now, which is what I was kind of hoping for. But my aunts show me photos, and I really got to know about my mother. They had things that she had made. She was creative. I'm very creative. So they had, little sewing things that she'd made and given to them, how long? 50 years ago, or, so long ago. And that's just so precious. So I got to see every photo that exists. I got to come home with some photos, and I just felt completely welcomed in to the family. That's great. Also got to meet my grandmother, my father's mother, who was 102, 103, and is how we found him, and my auntie, so on that side, and they lived in California, not far away from the other side of the family, which no one could get over. It's like, how come we're actually all close together?
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And you find out things that are similar. I know I was already figuring that out, but when I finished high school, I wanted to be an architect, and I went straight into architecture, but I unfortunately didn't finish that degree. But as soon as I discovered I had sisters, I was searching their Facebook pages, and my sister, the next sister, is an architect, and the other sister is a photographer. And I ended up swapping from architecture into teaching, and I was majored in photography. So I was like, what?
It's no coincidence.
No, it's
so. Lindy, where does your relationship with your father sit?
I haven't met him. We've spoken a few times. I want to go to the Philippines. I've said that I wanted to get there this year, but it might be the following year. I want to go to the Philippines and see where I was born. I just want to have that connection. he seems willing and opening, but from my perspective, he's not as consistent with his communication at times. So I feel like it's a bit hot and cold. So I'm very cautious, I guess, which I chose to go to America first because I felt there would be strong connections. I also have, oh my goodness, yeah, a million people are going to listen to this too. So from my father, I have two half brothers. So one brother, Carlos, has been in good connection, and he's in America, but he was in New York. He was on the other side, so I didn't get to see him. And I also have another half sister who's older than me, which is a surprise. And he didn't raise her, a similar sort of scenario, and she's in England. So yeah, I have to keep traveling. So I'd love to meet my sister too, and my brother Carlos, and I welcome them all to come here. So this year we've been looking at selling our house to see if we could, alleviate, downsize our mortgage so we could travel more, or now we are staying, and so we're making sure we have guest accommodation. But yeah, it's just thrown all of my whole life goals and perspectives upside down. Yeah. So before, as I said, I never even wanted to go to America to travel. Now I can't wait to get back, and I need my husband and children to meet their aunties. My sisters have children much the same age, so they've got cousins, and yeah, I just feel like I want them to meet everyone that I have, because there's such strong bonds.
It's amazing. I was wondering, you sort of have mentioned that you're in contact with Jigsaw and stuff. I'm wondering what kinds of support you have used, whether, formal types of support or other things. I know you're an artist, that have helped you during your search and during this whole time of discovery.
Yeah, so I've always gone to counsellors to try to figure out what was wrong with me and why I was depressed. So that wasn't new to me, but throughout this, I've been in contact with Jigsaw counsellors and PASQ, Post Adoption Services Queensland.
Support Queensland, yeah.
Yep. And so for the first time, I've had people who understand adoption. I'm kind of angry or surprised that I've gone to counselling for decades and nobody ever had any clue. Nobody ever said adoption was trauma or looked at my childhood. So there's a lot of gaps to be filled in a lot of areas there, I feel. So, but it's a big relief to finally have people who do understand, and that can help me to learn the complexities of these relationships. So as I said, I'm not talking to my adopted mother, and it's just really sad because she has her trauma. She was a person who couldn't have children, so she probably, when she got me, she had a huge amount of buried trauma, and it just has gone unspoken about, and then it just makes it very sticky and messy for people who aren't used to talking about all these things to suddenly have it blow up in, hey, this is what needs to be discussed. And it's been devastating that my biological mother has died so long ago in 1980. But it sounds awful. The one thing I feel relieved about is that she didn't have to have decades of stewing on it. So from what her husband does know her grief, and it seems like she suffered severely from depression for a few years, and it wasn't easy. And listening to everyone else's stories, I think that's so hard. It's so hard for a mother who's relinquished, who's had 30, 40 years of feeling her shame and pain, to suddenly have to connect with a child who's coming from a whole different angle. It's so difficult. But yeah, there are services to support us now, and having some of the peer groups have been really helpful, rather than just one-on-one counselling, to meet other adoptees and know that even though our individual stories are so different, we all share we share the same emotions. So much is the same. The details are different, but we just completely understand each other. You can sort of, you say one thing or you just say a few words and everyone's kind of nodding, like, we get it. Where nobody else does get it. Normal people, normal people or non-adopted people, they don't understand what it's like to not grow up with anybody you're related to not have that mirroring. I mean, and they believe everybody else who's not adopted believes that it's such a happy and good thing. They go, oh, but you're so lucky. You got to grow up in Australia. You got to have all these opportunities. But I don't deny all that I had and I've been given, but there's so much I've lost. And I think I'd love to educate other people to realize there's the loss. And adoption starts with that loss. And it's been hidden away from us all because no one talked about it. And it's constantly there. Even though I've met my sisters and have wonderful family relationships to now commence, there's 45, 46, 47 years that we haven't known each other, which is difficult. So I get sidetracked. I've also, I'm in an online group that is doing, what is it? It's exploring grief through art. So I've just connected with social media groups, Facebook, Instagram, and I've found, I guess, my tribe of other adoptees from around the world. A lot of them, all of them in that group are American because I guess I'm connecting with different American parts now, and I'm lucky that with the time difference, they meet on a Sunday, which is a Monday morning for me, and I usually work on the weekends, and so I have Mondays off. So I've been doing that, and we just get together and do some art, and each person in the group comes up with a different topic or a theme. It might be a poem or a song, and then we just get to create a response to that, which has been absolutely fabulous. So healing. I'm an art teacher, and I've gravitated to art in my own life because I think I needed it. I needed to heal. I needed to explore my feelings because I wasn't speaking about them. So I think I just headed there slowly as my career path. But even now, before this group, I wasn't using art for myself. I wasn't using it to express these feelings. So it's
that's fantastic
journey to be doing.
Well, look, Lindy, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to be putting up some links on our podcast notes page, and one of them I'll put up there is Intercountry Adoptee Voices, or ICAV, which I was talking to you about the other day, Lindy, and they've got really good educational videos there also for professionals. As you mentioned, when you were talking to counsellors and stuff over the years, they didn't understand adoption trauma. And these educational videos are for professionals either in mental health or teaching, and they're really good at letting those professionals know about those issues. So we'll put them on the podcast notes pages, and I highly recommend that everyone take a look, whether you're impacted by domestic or intercountry adoption. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been fascinating to hear your story, and I do hope you keep in touch and let me know how it keeps going, because you're really kind of at the cusp of everything. And it's just going to keep growing from this point. And I know that a lot of other people are going to benefit from hearing your story, Lindy. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. And it's just, my world has grown hugely, but it's extra complicated. And I'm thankful that people are understanding and listening to my story.
Thank you. And meanwhile, if you have a story that you'd like to share with us and you want to be interviewed for the podcast, just jump onto the main podcast page of the Jigsaw Queensland website and complete the prospective guest form that you'll find there. And note that Adopt Perspective can be listened to by people all over the world. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Adopt Perspective podcast. If you'd like to find out more, go to the podcast page on www.jigsaw.com.au. www.jigsawqueensland.com, and you'll find a wealth of information and resources on the website. If you reside in Queensland, you can reach Jigsaw Queensland's Forced Adoption Support Service on toll-free 1800 210313, or you can call Jigsaw on 07 33 58 6666. If you live in another state of Australia, you can still call the Forced Adoption Support Service number, and your call will be answered by the Forced Adoption Support Service in the state that you are calling from. In every other state, Relationships Australia operates this service. A big thank you to Matt Sparrow for composing and recording our original theme music. Until next time, I'm Jo Sparrow saying farewell from Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption.